Would you rather have wireless on the most reliable network nationwide or unlimited with 5G for $30 a month per line? You don't have to choose with Xfinity Mobile. Wireless so good it keeps one-upping itself. Most reliable based on Roots Metric US report. Results vary, not an endorsement. $30 per month per line when you get 4 lines.
Hi there, I am Adam Kirbas. This is another episode of my podcast. We are still in the pandemic. Nothing has changed since yesterday, and nothing is going to change in the foreseeable future, as it looks like. I'm here in Ordu in Turkey. It is a cloudy and rainy August day, an ordinary day, and we will continue talking about screenplays. I mean, something again I have to add before we continue. I mean, of course, we were talking about screenplays, or especially as characters, characters, and why they may have appeal to some people, or why certain characters appeal to people. So we are, in a way, analyzing these characters, and we were with Sex and the City, and we will continue that. But before we do, I mean, of course, we have to be aware of one thing, that Sex and the City, watched by peoples in the 90s, is of course or was differently perceived by people who watch Sex and the Cities in the 2000s or in the 2010s and 2020s. Of course, there is a difference. Of course, there is a divergence and so on, because one thing which we talked about it in great detail as well was actually the rise of internet, the rise of social media, which brought in a huge change. Especially was the most significant change, I would say, in human history, or one of the most significant changes in human history. The rise of the internet and social media. And of course, we have to be aware of one thing, that every generation, in a way, decodes special personalities, special TV personalities differently. Despite for example, Friends is a long-running TV show. It was already present in the 90s, and it is still watched by many people. And of course, I mean, of course, over the years, every generation some sort of decoded it differently. And I will refer again to one YouTube channel, which is actually a great inspiration for me. This is the YouTube channel, The Take, and there they some sort of outline that Sex and the City was in the beginning more in favor of the character Samantha, and then times or things shifted towards Miranda. I mean, we talked about some of the reasons why, but again we have to emphasize to the fact that every generation decodes some things, or codes and decodes something differently. I mean, we will talk today a little bit about Madman, about Don Draper, and what especially younger generation, especially the millennial generation, might think of Madman, why they really admire them and so on. And this is of course different from other generation. I mean, baby boomers and so on, they have other characters to look up onto. I mean, they admire other characters. I mean, I did not I would say I did not think, or this is of course in a way different. Maybe I will make a podcast about that as well, but assumably, I mean, in the 60s and 70s, Western movies were very present. So the baby boomers, in a way, they grew up with Western movies, John Wayne and so on, and then as well as science fiction, especially through the Cold War. And this has, of course, other implications. You seek or you admire other characters and so on. I mean, I talked briefly about James Dean. Well, now I don't know the English title of it. This was a novel of John Steinbeck with James Dean. I mean, I only know it is East of Eden. I think it is East of Eden, where a father has two sons, and one of the sons is some sort of at least in a way is a socialist, or has some socialist demeanor, whereas the other son, impersonated by James Dean, has some sort of a more capitalistic approach and so on. So and this other son, who is more capitalistic, and so it is more admired by his father and more approved by his father, and whereas this son who has a socialist demeanor in that sense goes nuts and so on. So this is how we have to understand, in a way, certain schemes or certain people we admire from their perspective. For example, for millennials, watching a Western is pretty much boring. I mean, if you now this is very subjective, so this is my personal opinion, but I struggle to sit through a Western because it is really some sort of, it has in a way nothing inviting for a millennial yet. Other generations loved it, admired it, and so on. So we always have to see this in a different perspective. So before we continue, and now I will continue with Carrie, I will sum up, I mean, what I talked in the end about yesterday, and this was that Carrie, in my opinion, the Sex and the City main protagonist, it is actually not a whole character. This is what we find in the TV show How I Met Your Mother as well. The character of Ted Mosby, he is actually not a full character, and this is what we find here with Carrie Bradshaw as well, because Carrie Bradshaw pretty much defines herself through that she is some sort of, or in a way mitigates the excesses of her free companions. Like she's not, we said she's not so, she has ideals, so she has I believe in love. In love, she wants to have this true love, especially with Mr. Big, but in a way she is not as naive as Charlotte, which has this old fashioned, if you want, believe in love. Then of course Carrie has in a way a feminist side as well, so that she want to bolster female identity, but it does not come with bitterness and some sort of like you have it in Miranda, because Miranda is a lawyer. This is the huge difference, whereas Carrie, we said, is a columnist. She writes about love, she writes about sex, and it is always assumed in a way that women know more about, not only about sex and love, but about relationships, so that women are experts, and so in a way, some sort of she as a writer, as a columnist, can be independent. She some sort of pursues a female profession, so she talks about love. This is what one assumes is a female domain compared to Miranda, who is some sort a lawyer who works in a male domain, has to adopt to male behavior, and so Carrie in that sense is different. Of course, she has an ideal. Of course, she has an and Carrie in a way differentiates herself from Samantha as well. Of course, she has a sex drive. Of course, she has some sort of a yearning for this male desire. In some, I think, pretty much in the beginning of the series, she says it in a way that she wants to crave sex like a man, and so, but it is not excessive like Samantha. It is rather filled with emotions, rather that with at least it appears that way, that it is more deeper, more with an ideal guided, and this ideal is the love she has for Mr. Big, or in general the love she has, or this idea of love she preserves in herself, and this is partially the difference to Samantha. And in that sense, you have to be aware that Carrie is some sort of a mixture of all three other women, and she is always some sort of if you want the average woman, this is how this is always in a way perceived. The average woman, or maybe not the average woman, but so this girl who is smart, who is beautiful, who has some sort of values. This is all again some sort of that you try to appease all these worlds, so all these demands of the world, which some sort of puts forward you. I mean, we talked about it. I mean, especially with the character of Samantha, that if you as a woman, if you have some sort of male craving, have a lot of sexual partners, people consider you as a whore and so on, and they will chide you and deride you as a whore. And with Carrie, we have some sort of in a way this attempt. She's some sort of a woman who has if you want a healthy sexual drive, and a healthy sexual drive means that she is capable to a meaningful relationship, that she wants to settle down. She wants to marry Mr. Big and so on. But as well as in the same instant, we have some sort of in Carrie the drive to be as a woman, to be independent. This is some sort of you have with her as a writer. So she pretty much does her own time. She writes about her own experiences, as well as about the in general, about the experiences of others and so on, about relationship, love, and this makes her some in a way independent. So she's an independent writer, freelancer, I assume. However, and then you see these combinations. So if you want, Carrie is some sort of admired by many women, especially women who some sort of know that there's a rift within the society. We talked about it the last time. I mean, in order to be successful as a woman, you have to adopt to some certain male behavior, in sacrificing your femininity, but when you do not go along with it, when you want to preserve your femininity, then this always comes with a loss of career opportunities as well, and as well as that if you mostly if you want to be successful as a woman, you have to do it in a male domain and so on. And with Carrie, things are of course different, because with Carrie we have to first time, it is an ideal, of course, because this is it is rather been put as an ideal. We have some sort of a woman who is feminine, who dresses like feminine. This is the difference to Miranda. Carrie dresses more feminine, more with style, if you want. So she has a lot of style, and more with style, more with beauty, and yet she succeeds in her field. She's independent, and yet she can still preserve her femininity, and this is healthy in a way. This is some sort of transmitted. This is healthy. She's successful in a male, in a female domain, and this female domain is important because of the topic, because of love, because of relationships. This is what you see pretty much in Sex and the City. The entire series is about love, is about relationships, is about not sex per se, but it is about relationship, and it is then presumed it is the most important thing that's out there, and carries in a way ahead of her field. And this makes her some sort of very successful in her own field, as well as that she can some sort of combine these two elements, that as a woman you can be successful without having to having to divulge into the male sphere, still preserve your own identity. This is some sort of one perceives with Carrie, and this is the reason why she, in a way, is not considered, or in a way you perceive her as if she would some sort of mitigate the excesses of all the others. So in that way, many women some sort of admire her because she combines those two elements, those two, if you want, sides which pull a woman in society. So what's it gonna be? Do you want to be successful, but you have to make sacrifice, or do you want to preserve your femininity? So in that sense, she is pretty much in the center, if you want. Then the second thing, of course, is that Carrie always appears to be the smartest of it all. So, but in a way, smart in a human way. I mean, of course, Miranda has been considered as very neat, smart, and so. But you could see that Carrie is she's not the tallest. I mean, she's smaller than Cement, or shorter than Cement, and so. But she's some sort of way you perceive this, and this is again very common. So she's some sort of a smart in a social way, in a human way, in a more relationship way. So she's not, if you want, some sort of geek smart. This is what you would partially assume Miranda is. I mean, she's some sort of a geeky look. Miranda, she's some sort of this kind of smart, which has no knowledge of relationship, or does know little about relationships, whereas Miranda, this is some sort of, if you want, the favorable smartness, this social smartness, social intelligence, and especially if life is only about relationships, if love is the center of it all, if relationships are in the center of it all, then of course you are the smartest in the world if you have social intelligence, if you know a lot about humans, about human behavior, and so on. So in that sense, you have to say that Carrie represents some sort of I would not say an average smartness, but a smartness which people in a way see more favorable, which is not geek smart, but it is some sort of social intelligent and so on. This is what you have in Gilmore Girls as well. I mean, for those who know the TV show in Gilmore Girls, if you have the Paris, this is Rory's friend, and then Rory, I mean, they two represent the two forms of smart in a way, whereas Paris in the Gilmore Girls represents some sort of a crazy, geeky, and strange way of smartness, whereas Rory some sort of represents a more human smartness, so down to earth smartness. This is especially Jennifer Lawrence, for example, in public always represents herself in that way. So she's in a way down to earth, has more social intelligence. So this is the way more favorable smartness than geeky, crazy smartness in that sense. And this is again what Carrie Bradshaw in Sex and the City represents as well, because she's smart. This is of course which you perceive. She knows a lot of about relationships. She writes for a newspaper. She knows people. She has values. So she lives by these values of love and so on. So she's not shallow, but as well as she is more feminine. So she's smart and yet still can preserve her femininity. And this is some sort of a favored smartness. This is a smartness which everyone would some sort of approve, or which we would in a way see as very positive. And Carrie Bradshaw in that way in Sex and the City favors this or represents it, and this is the reason why she is some sort of the main protagonist. This is what we have in How I Met Your Mother as well. Ted Mosby, he some sort of mitigates all the excesses of the others. I mean, especially of Barney Stinson. I mean, Barney Stinson, who is a pickup artist who wants to have a sexual intercourse with a lot of women whatsoever. And then there is of course Marshall, and who are some sort of married his college sweetheart. So there you have those two extremes. In the one hand, there's Barney, who is in a way shallow, who is in a way some sort of who has no deep meaning or a deep understanding of love. And then the other side, you have some sort of Marshall, who is rather too rigid, who is some sort of like their parents. You would assume, or this is some sort of, you pretty much assume in or perceive in How I Met Your Mother, said that Marshall and Lily are some sort of the parental figures, and this is, and their Ted Mosby is some sort of in the middle of it, and he has of course the idea of love as well, but he still is looking for him. So he does not have, for example, Marshall and Lily had, for example, only sex with each other. I think later it turns out that Lily had someone else as well. However, but if you see the TV show, it is rather that Marshall and Lily, this relationship is rather being presented as too narrow, or in a way as too old-fashioned. This is why they are rather have some parental or parental perception, whereas Barney is some sort of the child who has not grown up, and so on, and Ted Mosby is some sort of in the middle of it, and again he has no real character, and this is what we find in Carrie Bradshaw as well. So she is some sort of the center of the group. This is what you have in How I Met Your Mother as well. I mean, Ted is the narrator and the center of the group, but they have not really some sort of a character. Rather, they define themselves through the mitigation of the excesses of the others. I mean, this is to Sex and the City. I mean, of course, there may be some interpretation. I mean, this is my interpretation of it. Of course, this is open for other interpretations as well. However, I want to continue. This is for me very important for another TV show character, and this is Don Draper. I think this is actually a very interesting character, and again I have to and again I have to emphasize that you have to see this all from a different perspective, and especially in Don Draper, you can some sort of if you want, anticipate how many different people would decode the character in that sense. I mean, I would say, especially men, so I will only talk about the perception of men. But from a male perspective, one thing which in a way immediately picks out is, of course, Don Draper has a lot of sexual partners. He has a lot of women in his life. And for many men, actually, this is very, really favorable. So someone who has some sort of this edge, if you want, who has a lot of sexual relationships, this is admired, especially in a society. I mean, this is in general in a male society. We talked about this. This is about being a potent man, to prove your potency, to have some sort of male strength with a lot of female sexual partners. This is admired. This has been considered manly. There are a lot of examples from his history and so on, with men having a lot of women and so on. So in a some sort of society, in a male society where you have to prove that you are a man, that you are strong, that you are vivid and so on, of course it makes sense that you have the means, or show the means of your male success. We talked about success. This is not about just be like this. It is about success, especially with the turn and with the rise of the economic gender, or with the businessman narrative. So those wars, or especially in continental Europe, well, the military, or the reputation of the Austrian of the European militaries declined. In the US, they still have preserved some sort of reputation and acknowledgement. However, but in Europe, in continental Europe, the reputation of the military has declined. So you have to show other means why you are a successful man, and this is, of course, firstly with wealth. I mean, with cars or whatever, house cars. And the second thing, of course, that you're a potent man, that you can have a lot of girlfriends and so on. So this has been considered as wealthy. So, and if you see this in Don Draper, of course, some people will immediately admire that, or will say, look at him. I mean, he's obviously well off. I mean, he's wealthy, or considerable good situated, and he has a lot of girls or women in his life, and he is some sort of someone who can some conquer women, who is very good in conquering women, and therefore he is admired by many. Of course, then there are a lot of layers as well. Another layer would be that he is a boss, that he is a superior. This is especially if you come from a lower social background. I mean, where you were just a normal worker or whatever you are. So where you never had the chance to or where you were just a subordinate, whatever. I mean, in an assembly line, apprenticeship, carpenter, whatever. There, of course, you people have a partial desire to be on top, or to be considered the boss. So, and in Madman, you see this is a very positive approach, or a very masculine approach to being a boss. Because if you only see some sort of in Madman how, for example, Roger Sterling in a way conducts himself. Of course, he is the boss as well, but Roger Sterling in a way appears stupid, or is not naive in that sense. Some sort of someone you can hardly associate with, especially if you come from the lower backgrounds, because in Roger Sterling you some sort of really perceive that he is someone with privileges and so on. But the difference between Don Draper and, for example, Cooper is some sort of the other superior, if you want, in this ad agency, that Don Draper is some sort of a manly boss. So he's not one of these bosses who is just some sort of is in charge and some sort of talks about responsibility and so on. It would be way more different. For example, we talked about Grey's Anatomy. There are different processes in work. If you some sort of admire Richard Webber of Grey's Anatomy, or Preston Burke, because they are vividly some sort of they are doctors, you know, that some sort of, or in a way, if you're not highly educated, then of course you feel the barrier way more stringent or way more vividly than you might feel, for example, with Don Draper. Because what does Don Draper do from a perspective of someone who has worked physically or had physical labor? He's just someone who sits around all day long, smokes and brings himself to unconsciousness. And there it is some sort of easier, if you want, because you don't feel this barrier anymore. It doesn't really look difficult in a way to be an ad man. So you have just some occasionally some epiphanies, and that's it. However, but this plays probably only a small role. But the main or the reason why Don Draper as a boss because he is some sort of the or one of the leading executives of the ad agency is that he's more favorable, so that he's a boss, and he takes advantage of this as well. So you are a man, you take advantage of male, and this means that you have sexual partners, that you have a lot of females and so on, and as well as that you admire because he's not so petulant like Roger Sterling or some sort of distant and far detached like Bert Cooper, who is the other one. However, so you have some sort of many layers how people would in a way admire him. And the next thing, and this is then if you skip through them, then you come to other layers of understanding why Don Draper might be admired by many men. And this is then beyond, this has not only to do with that he has a lot of women, that he's a very potent man, and that he's in charge, that he's the boss, and he's some sort of a masculine boss. He's not some sort of weak in that sense, or in a way talks about the responsibility you have as a man fathers. This is something which you less feel by it. However, then another way to see it, or another way to admire it, of course, Don Draper or the TV show Madman, of course, reflects partially the life of man in the US in the 60s and 70s. This is true, but nevertheless, again, the Madman Don Draper has as well as a lot of influence to my generation, for example, and it still speaks to my generation because of this social mask, and especially if you see in Don Draper, and this is something you could interpret in that ways, that Don Draper in a way represents two forms of manhood, and the first form is the desirable. This is how everyone wants a man to be. So he's successful, he's potent. He's potent. He has this family man. He takes care of his family. He's successful, and so on. He's admired. This is what we talked about. What many people do not see, but if you are a man, or as a man in a society, of course, you have to fulfill some expectations society has on you, especially if in Don Draper society, if you want, has still some sort of conservative expectations on you, no matter whether people say, yeah, this is all obsolete, no one cares about them anymore, yet still people have these value systems incorporated, and in this value system, a real man who is he's successful, he takes care of his family, he's potent, he has money, and so on, and he has some sort of a lot of women who admire him, who wants to be around him, even though you see this as well as in Sex and the City. I talked about this. I mean, if you only compare Mr. Big to Steve, to Miranda's boyfriend Steve, then you see the huge difference, and you would see then that Mr. Big is still has some conservative attitudes, or represents conservative values values of male success. And this is what you see in Madman as well with Don Draper. And then you have, of course, the darker side of Madman. And this is that Don Draper is actually Dick Whitman, and that he's a coward, especially in the Korean War. This is what no one really wants to talk about, is that he was actually a coward. He pissed himself and he took over the identity of someone who is actually a war hero. So here are again analogies to this militaristic gender. As a man, you have to function in the military, you have to be brave, you have to fight for cause and so on. And there you see that Dick Whitman fails. He's scared, he pisses himself. He's not the man in, if you want, in those old standards and so on. And then of course he tries to some sort of conceal his past. This is again something which speaks to some of these men, because he conceals his past. He wants to close this door, and he took over the identity of this war hero. This is very important. This war hero who fought in Korea bravely and so on. I mean, this is something you can interpret it as well. And there you see that this society which demands a lot of man, that you have to still be masculine, that you still have to be accomplish something and so on, that this has of course a lot of, or puts a lot of pressure on you as well, especially as a man, and this then has some sort of a darker side, if you want, that you have to hide, that you are not this man, that you have to hide, that you are not manly, or in that sense, or that you are not this man. After all, this is especially self-doubt, what we would say here. So in a society which demands of you that you have to be manly by all costs, of course you sooner or later will have start doubting yourself, especially when in a society you are confronted with a feminism who wants to do away of it, or as well as it doesn't has to be feminism. We talked about it as well. I mean, if you were brought up in the belief that you are a Aryan and that you are part of a superior race, of course you will struggle to accept that a foreigner is smarter than you and so on. So you always have to prove yourself to the society, and this is not always possible. This is not always easy. This is indeed very difficult, and this is what men struggle with as well. So this is not only with racism, but as well as with in general society still identificates man to be on top, to lead, to guide, and everyone expects you to do that. But if you are not given the chance, or if you are given the chance, you still have to prove yourself every day, then this might lead to inner conflicts as well. And this is what you see partially in Don Draper's Madman as well. So you always, his past is always haunting him. He was this coward, Dick Whitman, who was the son of a whore, or whatever. This means actually nothing else than he was a lowborn. Whereas if you are, whereas this war hero, if you want, some sort of was a knight, was a high-born blue blood, and he always has to hide himself. He always has to hide himself and his low background, as well as his cowardice. We will talk about this the next time a little more. This was Adam Kebas from Ordu in Turkey. We are still in the pandemic. I hope that you take care of yourselves. Bye.
It's finally time to start firing up the grill. From city to shore, Acme is everything you need to prep for this summer season. Download the Acme app to shop for this season's essentials any way you want. Open the Acme app, clip your deals, then order your items online. An experienced Acme associate will carefully select your groceries, bag your order, and bring it right to your car or deliver right to your door. Download the app or visit acmemarkets.com for program details.